This session is on negotiation and communication, and specifically we're going to focus on the stages of negotiation and also communication in negotiation. So understanding the stages of negotiation and also understanding the importance of communication strategies in workplace negotiation. So these are the 5 stages of negotiation: preparation and planning, definition of ground rules, clarification and justification, bargaining and problem solving, and also closure and implementation. So stage 1 is the preparation and planning, and this stage is probably the largest and most important stage of negotiation. So before commencing the negotiation, it's really important to evaluate the potential benefits and risks of engaging or not engaging in that negotiation. So for example, if you're about to start a salary negotiation with your employer, you might want to think of the potential benefits. So okay, the potential benefits of engaging in that negotiation may mean that you get an increased salary. The potential risks of actually starting that negotiation may influence the relationship between yourself and your employer, particularly if perhaps the promotion or the salary negotiation is premature. Perhaps you've only just started in the organisation, or perhaps you are already at quite a high level in accordance to your experience and skills. So you need to sort of weigh up what the benefits and risks are of actually entering into that negotiation, and what the wider implications may mean. So for example, if you are entering into a negotiation with your boss about salary, there might be potential risks from the employer's point of view if they agree to obviously that salary increase, that there might be other employees that also want that same increase. There's key elements of the preparation. You need to consider the different types of parties involved. So it may be an individual where it's just you obviously talking to your supervisor, or there may be multiple parties involved. So if we look at the Qantas dispute, for example, there were unions involved and different types of unions involved in that dispute. Obviously there were the Qantas representatives in terms of those employer associations, so there were a number of parties involved in that negotiation. You need to consider, really importantly, the relationship between the party and how important that relationship is in terms of sustaining that for a long time. And that will also depend a little bit on the type of negotiation style that you use. So if you've just started with an organisation and you're keen to build up a relationship with the organisation and with your employer, it may alter that type of style and the type of demands of that negotiation. If you're very experienced, you're confident, you've been obviously in the organisation a long period of time, perhaps the relationship isn't so important, there's other organisations, other opportunities that you can pursue, again, that might influence how you enter that negotiation. So it's important to think on what's important. Is the outcome important, or is that relationship particularly important? Also considering the style, not just of yourself, and it's really important to be aware of your own negotiation style, but also consider the style of the other party in terms of whether they might be likely to engage in more of a competing style. It may mean that you want to adjust your style and how you approach the negotiating table accordingly. Think of your interests and your positions, again, of both parties. So the interests, again, are those underlying reasons of why you're actually entering into this negotiation. So the fact that you want an increased salary, the reason might be because you obviously have earned that through increase in experience. Perhaps you're in accounting and you've done that extra accreditation. So there could be areas of reasons why you've asked for that salary increase, and of course that needs to then be explicit to your employer. You also need to pitch it in a certain way that is also going to be a benefit to the employer. So if we're looking at increased skills and knowledge as a reason behind an increase in salary, then your employer might see that as a fair argument. If you're putting a reason forward because you can't afford your mortgage, or perhaps your kids go to private school and you need more money, then again, hopefully you can see that your employer might not see that as a fair reason. And also thinking again of the interests, the underlying interests of your employer. So there might be reasons why, from a financial point of view, where an increase in salary may not be feasible to occur. Okay, so that's where some of your best alternative to their negotiating agreement might come into play. There might be alternatives, there might be other flexible benefits, other perks that might be of interest if, for example, the employer may not be able to financially fund the increase of salary. Okay, so thinking about interests and positions of both parties. Think about the impact of the point actually being negotiated. So you might think as an individual that you're going in to see your supervisor or your employer to talk about salary and increase in salary, but the impact of that is often a lot wider. One is the impact of other employees them finding out that you've got an increase in salary, and perhaps they might want one too. Also the impact perhaps as a result of that relating to the financial aspects of the organisation. So it's really important to sort of consider that wider impact, and that'll help you in terms of preparing appropriately for the negotiation. The key with coming into a negotiation is the information and knowledge that you have prior to actually negotiating, and that's what gives you the leverage and the power. So stage 2 is all about defining ground rules, the location of the negotiation, fairly descriptive, fairly straightforward, who will be present, trying to get a gauge with the timing or length, and also the acceptable behaviours is really important. And again, this is where in the preparation of thinking about the different styles, thinking about the importance of the relationships between the two parties will help you to get a bit of an idea of some of these ground rules. Clarifying and justifying your case, so making sure that you've got a clear statement of purpose in terms of what you want and what your optimal outcome is. Sharing information and also making sure that you're clarifying with questions. Stage 4 is the actual bargaining and problem solving process. So you're discussing options and working towards solutions, developing creative ideas to benefit all parties. And this is where it's a good idea before you go in, if you're looking at a salary negotiation, to think about different options. Again, like I mentioned, those flexible benefits, flexible working hours, there might be other options instead of that financial benefit. So this is where the making of concessions and trade-offs might be really important, but it's good for you going into the negotiation to have some alternatives. And then finally, stage 5 is the closure and implementation, where the agreement has been reached, you're evaluating outcomes and determining whether you did have to take some sort of alternative to your optimal outcome. So I want you to try and apply what I've just said to the stages. You've been performing your role for a long time without a salary negotiation or pay raise. Despite good results, you're still earning the average salary of lesser colleagues. So I want you to use the 5 stages of negotiation about how you would go about negotiating a higher salary. Okay, so you spend a few minutes in going through the stages. You can refer back to the earlier slides and some of the points I've made in relation to this. What do you think are 2 of the most important things that make workplace negotiations successful? Possible answers could include the preparation is particularly important, communication skills, humour, maybe, separating the people from the problem, looking forward rather than looking backward, and perhaps having a win-win approach. Have a look at this video link on communication and negotiation, and think about how you can use communication in terms of verbal and non-verbal to positively influence negotiation. So perhaps in terms of your verbal communication, it may even be important in the preparation or the planning to actually practice how you are going to say things in that negotiation. And practice your argument, practice the points that you want to make. And make sure that your verbal communication is confident and clear. In terms of your non-verbals, in terms of simple things like sitting up straight in a negotiation, constant eye contact is also really important in a negotiation. Again though, if you were negotiating internationally in different cultures, you'd have to revise some of the verbal and non-verbal cues. Some other key tips for using communication effectively in negotiation might be to provide a perspective that helps others to understand your position. This is really where the interests come into play in terms of helping the other party to understand why you might be entering the negotiation or why you're looking for that desired outcome. Think of ways that you can influence the other party's decision, and again, a lot of that comes back in the planning and preparation in terms of the information and knowledge that you have to try and convince the other party in terms of your desired outcome. In terms of the language, using I, so you're taking responsibility for the communication. Avoiding language that might come across defensive or aggressive in a negotiation. That's obviously going to get the other party offside very quickly. And also pay attention to the non-verbal cues of yourself in terms of how you're sitting, that eye contact again, and also what's happening from the other party. And that'll also help you to gauge what's happening throughout the negotiation. In terms of non-verbal cues and body language, have a look at this video from Amy Cuddy about body language and looking at how body language affects how others see us, but also it might change how we see ourselves and others. Looking at how do we respond when we are under threat.